All right, let's dive right into this. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely epic ancient narrative. We're going to explore the biblical story of Daniel, a teenager who literally outlasted entire global empires through sheer unbending conviction. Now, throughout our explainer today, we're going to look at this source material from a completely neutral reporting perspective. We want to really examine how this ancient text presents a story of survival, identity, and just unyielding belief against the backdrop of shifting, terrifying superpowers. It's a genuinely compelling look at human resilience.
So just imagine this for a second. What would you actually do if the most powerful king on earth demanded that you abandon your god or die? I mean, that is the core hook of this source material. It frames the ultimate conflict of this entire narrative. It's all about the immense, literal life-or-death pressure of holding on to your own identity and your beliefs when you are completely surrounded, outnumbered, and overpowered by a hostile dominant culture.
Okay, here is our agenda for today. 1. Exile to a new empire. 2. Dreams and a fiery furnace. 3. The fall of proud kings. 4. Surviving the lion's den. And finally, 5. Lessons in faith and courage.
Section 1. Exile to a new empire, from Judah to Babylon.
You know what's really fascinating here is the empire's systematic approach. The narrative kicks off with King Nebuchadnezzar conquering Jerusalem, taking their sacred temple vessels and marching these royal youths, including a 15-year-old kid named Daniel, hundreds of miles away to Babylon. And this wasn't just some random relocation. According to the text, it was a deliberate 3-year assimilation program. The whole goal? To make these kids forget who they were. They were taught a new language, new literature, and profoundly, they were assigned entirely new names honoring Babylonian gods. So Daniel became Belteshazzar, and his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
But right out of the gate, the text shows Daniel drawing a massive line in the sand. The youths were offered this rich, decadent food and fine wine straight from the king's own table. But Daniel, who believed this would make him unclean according to his faith, just straight up refused. He proposed a really simple 10-day test. Just give us vegetables and water. That's it. And the source highlights that at the end of those 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked noticeably healthier and stronger than everyone else who'd been eating the king's rich diet. All right, Section 2. Dreams and a fiery furnace. Visions and golden statues.
So God grants these youths incredible wisdom, and Daniel specifically gets the ability to interpret dreams. And boy, is that put to the test quickly. The king has this terrifying nightmare and demands that his wise men not only interpret it, but tell him what the dream was in the first place. And if they can't, execution. When nobody can do it, Daniel steps up. The text reports that he accurately describes the king's dream. A dazzling, giant statue with a head of pure gold, a chest of silver, a belly of bronze, and legs of iron fading into clay feet. Daniel interprets this as a succession of earthly kingdoms, each one inferior to the last. And then a stone cut without human hands comes crashing down, shatters the statue, and grows into a mountain. Daniel explains this is God's eternal kingdom that will outlast and crush all the others. This wild revelation completely saves the wise men and gets Daniel a huge promotion.
Well, that piece doesn't last long at all. Fast forward a bit, and King Nebuchadnezzar's pride is just swelling out of control. He builds this massive golden statue on the plain of Dura. And when I say massive, the stakes hit a staggering 90 feet. To put that into perspective, that's like an 8- or 9-story building made entirely of gold. He commands every single official to fall down and worship the statue the second the music plays. The penalty for refusing? You get thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. So the music plays, and literally everyone bows. Everyone, that is, except Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Naturally, jealous rivals tattle on them to the furious king. And when the king threatens them with the furnace, they deliver this incredibly dramatic mic-drop response. The God we serve is able to save us, but even if he does not, we will not bow. The source presents this as a moment of absolute, uncompromising defiance in the face of an earthly king's terrifying rage. And wow, the king just completely loses it. You really have to marvel at the sheer, stubborn ego of these ancient rulers. The narrative tells us he was so furious that he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. It was so impossibly, ridiculously fierce that the flames actually killed the king's strongest soldiers, the guys who were just trying to drag the bound men into the fire. What happens next is practically a movie scene. The king leaps up in absolute shock. He's staring into this roaring fire and utters this famous realization: "I see 4 men,
walking freely in the flames, unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods. According to the text, these guys casually walk out of the furnace. No singed hair, their robes are untouched, they don't even smell like smoke. Astounded, the king ends up praising their god and, you guessed it, promoting them even further.
Moving on to Section 3, the fall of proud kings, madness, and the writing on the wall.
Decades pass and Nebuchadnezzar gets another troubling dream, this time about a massive tree cut down to a stump. Daniel gravely warns him that the tree is him and he'll be driven mad if he doesn't repent of his pride. Exactly 12 months later, the king is up on his roof boasting about his own incredible glory. And before the words even leave his lips, a voice from heaven strips his kingdom away. He instantly loses his sanity. For 7 long years, he's driven away from society. The narrative describes him eating grass like an ox, his hair growing out like eagle feathers, and his nails getting as long as bird claws. The text states his sanity and his kingdom are only restored when he finally looks to heaven and wholly surrenders that massive pride.
Okay, fast forward again, this time to his descendant, King Belshazzar. He's throwing this reckless, arrogant feast, brazenly drinking wine out of the sacred temple vessels that were stolen from Jerusalem. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a disembodied human hand appears and starts writing a cryptic message right on the plaster wall. Terrified, the king calls for Daniel, who is now an old, largely forgotten man in the court. Daniel translates the spooky writing, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. He delivers a brutal verdict. God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You have been weighed and found wanting. Your kingdom is finished.
And that brings us to Section 4, Surviving the Lion's Den, a new empire and old faith. That very night, Belshazzar is killed. Babylon falls, bringing in the Medes and the Persians. Yet, miraculously, Daniel rises to the top of the political ladder once again under the new ruler. When you actually lay out this timeline, it's just mind-blowing. The text shows Daniel surviving a literal lifetime in exile, outlasting successive kings, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius, and eventually Cyrus. He navigates multiple, violent regime changes without ever once compromising his core identity.
But as you might expect, having a totally flawless record makes your rivals incredibly jealous. They want Daniel gone, but they can't find any dirt on him, so they set a brilliant, twisted political trap. They realize they can only take him down through his religious devotion. They basically flatter King Darius into signing a strict 30-day ban on praying to anyone but the king, and they make it an unchangeable Medo-Persian law. Now, Daniel knows all about this decree. But the source notes he immediately goes to his room, opens his window toward Jerusalem, and prays 3 times a day, exactly as he always had. He's caught, and the trap is sprung.
The text really slows the pace down here to build this incredible dramatic tension. King Darius is absolutely heartbroken. He realizes he's been played, but he's totally bound by his own unchangeable law. He has no choice but to seal Daniel in a den of lions. The narrative describes the king fasting all night, pacing, unable to sleep, and then rushing to the den at the very first light of dawn. He calls out, just hoping against hope. And from the dark comes Daniel's voice. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel is pulled up without a single scratch on him. And in a brutal twist of fate, his scheming accusers are thrown to the lions instead.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Lessons in Faith and Courage. Thematic takeaways from a lifetime in exile.
Daniel prospers all the way into the reign of Cyrus, who actually ends up decreeing that the Jews can return to Jerusalem. But looking back, this narrative draws a brilliant contrast: grand public arrogance versus quiet private faithfulness. Think about it. We see kings boasting on palace roofs and hosting these wild, reckless feasts. But in stark contrast, Daniel's immense strength didn't just magically appear when he was thrown into the lion's den. The source emphasizes that he had been kneeling in his upper room, quietly praying by his window day after day, year after year, for decades. His resilience was built in the quiet, unseen routines, way before the public tests ever arrived.
So if we summarize the ultimate lessons the source derives from this epic lifetime, we really get 4 main takeaways. First, as we just saw, deep faith is built in quiet routines. Second, true courage is faith without guarantees. It's doing the right thing even if you don't know you'll be saved, perfectly captured by that incredible phrase, even if he does not. Third, no one is beyond reach. Nebuchadnezzar proved that extreme pride will destroy you, but sincere surrender restores you. And finally, the source draws this massive, direct theological parallel. It connects Daniel emerging alive from a sealed stone den to Jesus emerging alive from a sealed stone tomb centuries later, highlighting a really deep thematic resonance between the two accounts.
We're going to leave you today with this final, provocative thought to chew on. You see, this ancient text isn't just some dusty history of dead empires. It asks a really piercing question of its audience. When you are faced with insurmountable pressure to assimilate, to compromise your integrity, and to completely abandon who you are, will you stand firm when the rest of the world tells you to bow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.